the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Excuses are free and they're easy. And there's nothing easier than making excuses. And when we know that God asks certain things of us, He has certain requirements. Do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. There are certain things that are expected of us, and they're commands. He's commanding us to do these things. I've heard this excuse a number of times. Maybe I have even made this excuse to myself. That I would do this thing that I'm commanded to do. I would, but I don't have the strength for it. I don't have the patience for it. I don't have the love for it. I don't have the faith to do this. It sounds reasonable to say that. That's exactly where the disciples are, the apostles are saying to Jesus at the beginning of the gospel today. It says, the apostles said to the Lord, increase our faith. They feel like their faith is lacking. And they're asking Christ to increase their faith. As if God has a swimming pool in heaven full of faith, and He can scoop up a gallon of faith and add it to people's souls, as if faith is like some kind of substance that can be quantified and increased and decreased. That's the way they're imagining it. But there's actually something else behind that as well. When I say to Christ, I don't have the faith to do this, I don't have the love to do this, what's behind that? Just sort of the intention of that. I don't know what's maybe in the intention of the person doing it, but the meaning of the words implies something. It implies that I am not doing this, and it's God's fault. That's the implication of those words. It's God's fault that I don't have the faith to do this. If He had given me the faith, I would have done it. But He didn't, so it's His fault. It goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. When God says, you ate of the fruit I told you not to eat, and Adam says, the woman you created. He's blaming God for his sin. You, God, didn't give me purity. You, God, let me do this. You, God, didn't give me. You see how excuses are so easy. It's making it God's fault. And if there's one thing that's our fault, it's when we reject grace. That's our fault. And Jesus' answer is, if you had faith the size of a grain of mustard seed. Have you seen a mustard seed? It's really small. I don't know how small it is. It's like the size of 5 grains of sand, if you kind of push them together into a ball. It's a really, really small little seed. And Jesus says, that's all. What do you mean more? That's all you need. And you'd be able to do anything. You'd be able to perform miracles. Don't blame God. And in fact, when we say, I'm not saying don't pray for an increase of faith. Pray for it with humility, though. Don't do it in a way that you're going to blame God for your faults. As if it's God's job to do your job. God has done His job. Christ has died on the cross. He has saved us. Salvation is accomplished. That grace has been given to us for free. We earned it, not at all. But it's our job to accept it. Look how Jesus turns it upside down. He says, which of you who has a servant who's plowing or keeping sheep, and then he comes in from the field, who would say to him, come and sit down and have dinner? Well, no. Let me translate the image, because we don't have servants anymore, which is, I think, probably a good thing. We don't really have fields, most of us. I don't know, maybe you have fields or something, but it's the equivalent of, you have an employee. Okay, you have an employee. You treat him well. You're not like an abusive employer or something like that. You have an employee. The employee works half a day. That's the equivalent of what's happening here. And at the end of half a day of work, who would say to the employee, okay, good, you've done your job, go home? Well, no, dude, you still have another half a day. You got to do all your job. Who at the end of half a day of work would say to the employee, thank you? It's nice to say thank you. It's a polite thing to say. But you still got the right, we're all working here. Let's all finish our job. That's the equivalent. That's what's going on in the parable. And so what is Jesus doing? He's putting the responsibility on us. No more excuses. It's not God's job. It's your job. You have a job. You're the servant here. And when you haven't even done half of it, you're starting to blame God for you not doing the other half. You haven't even done the half. Look at what he says at the end. This is one of the heaviest things in the gospel, if we understand it. And I'm going to be honest with you. I actually think this is a part of the Bible that we are supposed to take absolutely literally. He says at the end, you also, when you have done all that is commanded, say, we are unworthy servants. We have done only what was our duty. I think we're supposed to take that literally. Part 1, you want to increase your faith? Okay. Do everything commanded to you. Do it. Actually act. Actually work. Actually live your faith. That's number 1. 2, do it all. And then 3, when you have done it all the stuff that's commanded of you, all the stuff that's expected of you, after you've done all of it, then verbally say, actually say this. Say, I am an unworthy servant. I've done only what I was commanded to do. Man, that breaks your pride in half. Actually say that, and maybe say that every day, and say it at the end of the longest days you've had. And you work, and then you come home and you take care of the house, and you take care of the kids, and you take care of the family, and you do everything. When you're done with everything, and you want to start complaining, say this instead. You want to increase your faith? This is how you do it. Because now you're actually doing, and say it and mean it. Because it's when we act like we're doing God a favor every time we do something good, we act like we're making God's life better. You're not making God's life better. I've said that a million times. You're helping yourself. And God is giving us commands because they're good for us. And when you've done all of them, at the end of that day, kneel and say to God and mean it, Lord, I am an unworthy servant. I have done only what was my duty. Doing that after you've done everything. By the way, you don't get to do that if you've only done half. If you've only done half, you don't get to pray yet. Go back and finish the rest of it. Then when you've done all of it, and you say that, then you will watch your faith burst into flame. Because faith is not this quantitative thing. It's a living thing, it's a seed, it's a tree that is growing and that we water through these works. Amen.